Hey, everybody, this is Tom Sega with Duluth Pack, and this is the Duluth Pack podcast, Leader of the Pack. Our special guest today is a person I've gotten to know over the last few years, and he is also a gentleman who had a podcast, and now he is the content writer, copywriter, editor, managing director, and content creator for C.W. Goetz Outdoors. Welcome, C.W. Goetz.
Well, thank you, Tom. Great to be here. And by the way, did you also mention the cleaning man? And I make coffee as well. So
I didn't, but they all know that small businesses, everybody pitches in. You roll up your sleeves, and you get to do a little bit of everything.
It goes with the territory, doesn't it? And I noticed when we were there, you're the chief, and yet you do some jobs that I'm thinking, wow, I think I just hire somebody to do that. But you're very involved. I love very impressive, by the way.
You know what? As your business, you're small businesses, and you're on limited budgets, and guess what you do? You be very conservative and don't spend where you don't need to spend. But this is not to talk about me, because you have such an interesting story. CW, this is all to talk about you. So let's jump in here and let's just find out, before we get to where you are, let's find out your background and tell us your childhood. Where did you grow up? What did you like to do? What was your childhood all about?
Well, I'll tell you what, Tom, it's funny. I very distant from where I grew up. I mean, as far as a work sort of aspect, but I still live here. I grew up on the farm in north central Illinois. I grew up on a farm. In fact, my dad was a farmer before he retired, and that we grew up talking about this yesterday: baling hay, shelling corn, pulling weeds in the beans, all that fun stuff. All the things that kids really would rather be doing than hanging out with their friends in town. You know how that goes, right? Swimming pool and all that. That's just nonsense. Nobody likes that. Well,
but I bet you learned some work ethic, didn't you?
Well, in fact, we did. We also learned how to work out some problems because, how would I say this? Negotiation skills and things like that. Because I grew up with a brother. Okay. It was one of those things when you don't get to hang out with your friends all that much. You're pretty much stuck on the farm, pulling weeds out of the beans and things like that with your brother. It's you two. And if you don't get along with him, you don't have anybody to talk to. So you kind of figure out stuff like that, skills like that early on. So there was that. And of course, you beat the heck out of one another every now and then, but that's all part of the learning negotiation tactics and techniques and things, as they say. But yeah, I grew up in the farm. And honestly, it was really a good childhood. It was a great childhood. I look back now and I'm thinking, I felt like, at the time, I felt like many farm kids, we're missing out on something in town, and all the, all the things that city kids, it wasn't a big city, but town kids, let's just call them that, were doing and things like that. But when I look back, we spent some quality time outdoors. And I think that is one of the things that led me into things like scouting and honestly, what I do now, which is my things, I guess, are canoeing and camping. But I always enjoyed that. I think knowing my personality and what I did after high school, I think that if I would have been involved more with the city kids, as it were, in town, I probably would have got myself in a lot of trouble. But good thing that I didn't. So my dad kept us busy, and of course, that sort of thing. And people say, well, in the town, anyway, we get an allowance. How much do you get? I guess we get to put our feet under the table. That's what my dad says anyway. So basically, I'm sure you understand that. We're about the same age. So yeah, it was one of those things where you really appreciated where you grew up more so later on in life than you did in the moment, I guess, for lack of a better term. So, yeah.
So you grew up on a farm and you talked about scouting. Were you also in 4-H? Because a lot of farm kids were, and that was an outlet, and that was a place to gather with other like-minded kids.
fact, we were. 4-H is one of those things. In fact, I wrote this down just before the broadcast here. 4-H. Another thing was FFA. Do you remember that, Tom? It
I
was the
do.
Future Farmers America. Yeah. So I was
Yes.
involved in both of those, and it just kind of. I got to tell you though, um, when I was in 4-H, I had it's kind of my interests were all over the place. I was into photography, but the mainstay there was cattle, and so beef cattle specifically, and that was kind of something that my father or our father wanted us really to get into. And for a while we were, but my interest sort of waned, in that area and went into more of the entertainment, which I'll talk about here in a second. But yeah, those two were big. Yeah, I guess when you're in the country, also, I guess my dad must have felt sorry for us because he bought us motorcycles and snowmobiles and things like that because he figured, well, yeah, these guys don't get to go into town and associate with their friends in the summertime. So I'll try to make it up to them somehow. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun with our motorized toys here in the country, as it were.
And you had all the wherewithal to put them back together after you broke them because on the farm you learned to fix it on your own, don't you?
Well, yeah, we got into Dad's tools several occasions because of such mischievous things. Actually, not mischievous. I tell you what, we used to crash those things about once per week, and there were lots of battle wounds on those motorcycles and snowmobiles, and but you know what? Plus, we learned, like you said, we learned how to fix things on our own. It wasn't like Dad was going to go, well, I'll take it to the shop and get it fixed. No, you broke it. You fix it. If you can, if you can't, too bad for you. So, yeah, there were a lot of lessons there to be learned.
At CW also talked about scouting. And when did you get into scouting and how far did you go in scouting?
Well, I think the first thing I did was, well, I know was the Cub Scouts, what we call the Cub Scouts. And think, I don't know if that was like 7, 8 years old, something like that. I think is when we may have started that. And then we went into something called Webelos, which, by the way, I for some reason I didn't sign up for that, but that was the intermediate stage between Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts. But I was a Boy Scout. Actually, tell you the truth, I just remembered this the other day. When I was a first year Boy Scout, I was always a pretty good shot. Now, there's something else, Tom. When you're a kid in the country and your dad buys you a BB gun for Christmas, you shoot it because it's just something to do. I remember shot my brother in the fingernail one time. I didn't do it on purpose, but he was standing in the driveway, and I was mad at him, and I kind of wanted to scare him, so I shot and I pointed down. He was standing in the driveway, and the BB must have hit a rock, and it ricocheted up and hit him right in the fingernail. He let me know that hurt pretty good. So, but that gun, that BB gun, and I had enough target practice with that thing with different things. I'm not going to go into that, but I won a watermelon for the troop, my first Boy Scout camp. And now all these big guys, were like, what? He won a watermelon? It's like the youngest guy probably at camp. And so I was a hero for a day. So for an evening, I guess. Our whole troop got to eat watermelon, and I don't know if we had ice cream or not, but anyway, that was a little shining moment for me.
Is that where you found your love for camping and canoeing and the outdoors? Is when you were scouting, or did it come after that?
No, I tell you what, I always, I don't know what the thing was for me, but I always had an interest in Native American things. Okay, so for instance, when I think it was second grade or first grade or something like, I was going from first to second grade. It's 1971, 72. Our parents took us to Wisconsin, and there's a place called Wisconsin Dells and Baraboo and things like that. We had I was introduced to the Indians, their tribe, and I can't even tell you what tribe that is, and I would probably be, if it was a Potawatomi or something like that. But anyway, they did different dances, and we watched a ceremony one. I'm like, wow, it's just fascinating. And I think that started my fascination with all things Native American. Involved or included were canoes. And so that sort of thing appealed to me. And when I got to Boy Scouts, I actually got to hop in my first canoe and paddle it. And thus began the love affair with those vessels. So I was always interested in that. In fact, when I was that age, first, second grade, we used to sneak off down the road with our Montgomery Ward bicycles and a big old canvas tent that I think I got for my birthday, at least that year, I think. Anyway, which my birthday was in April. So it was a nice spring, birthday present. I took my canvas, heavy canvas green, military green tarp with no floor, by the way, strapped it with some of these rubber bungee straps or the tarp straps for like you get on grain trucks, and cruised down the road to the neighbors, which was our relatives, their timber pasture. And we would camp out a couple days, steal some of the canned soup, that my mom, things like that. And that's where I really discovered camping. When I was in Boy Scouts, I just got to maybe step up a level to the mid-professional level, I guess you'd say, because we had, other types of fancier tents and real cooking utensils and things like that. So yeah.
So you get done with school, you've been in 4-H and FFA, and you've been in Boy Scouts, and you're like, holy cow, now I got to start my career. Let's talk about the start of your career and what you started doing and what you learned from that.
Well, so here's, I warned you that there might be some interesting things in here, some peculiar things. I'll tell you, after high school, let's go backwards. When I was in high school, I played in the school band. I also wrote for the school newspaper. In fact, I was the first one to have their own column in the school newspaper. And then coincidentally, I think it was when it was freshman year, I was 14 years old, first part of my freshman year. In fact, I joined my first band and first rock band. And so we did a couple of gigs and things like that. And that kind of continued more so and more so throughout high school. But when I graduated high school, my thing was I want to be a rock star. But I enjoyed writing. And it was kind of I guess both may fall under the entertainment, the category of entertainment, but I really enjoyed playing music. The bigger than that, I wanted to just be a rock star. I mean, what kid probably hasn't at some point or another said, boy, wouldn't it be cool? And, especially during the 80s, there's a big glam thing going on, that's what I really wanted to do. My father had other plans for me. He said, you'll go to college and you'll go to college. You do whatever you want after college, but you're going to college. And in college, he heavy persuasively had me take a diesel mechanics course. I didn't really want to do that, but he owned my car at the time. And so it was kind of like, I'm going to influence you the best I can, or else, that sort of thing, which I get now. I totally get. But the biggest thing is I took the classes that I was supposed to, at least the lab classes, and the things like the math and things like that in English. I go, you know what? I'm not really worried about getting a degree in this. I'll tell you what I would like to have a degree in is journalism. So I snuck the journalism classes in there and didn't receive any type of degree in either because they didn't have that focus going on. But I got enough journalism classes where it taught me a lot. And I was able to do the things that I have done even today with that, that knowledge and that training. So, yeah, that's kind of what happened in college. Left college. And then wouldn't you know it, I got a job in my field, which was welding. So I was a welder. I know, right? Yeah. So I was a welder. Actually, my first job was, I think 3 months, 4 months, something like that. Spent as a car dealer at an auto dealership, and that company ended up going bankrupt, and so went out of business for one reason. I think it was maybe in bankruptcy. Anyway, so I got a job as a welder, did that for, I think, 6 months. And then I forgot how big. I think I went on the road with the band. So that's kind of one of those things where my first couple jobs had nothing to do with what I went to school for. So there's a long drawn out explanation for that.
So tell us about the band and the music.
Well, the band and the music. Well, I grew my hair really long. I don't even know if I told you that, Tom, but if I showed you pictures, you'd probably get quite a laugh out of it. One of the things that I did in 1985, in fact, I was a little out of the box, so to speak. Most of the guys in the area, and we did some touring and things. One of the things that I was just driven toward was doing something that no one else was doing, at least at the time, at least in my little corner of the world. Okay. My little shoebox, so to speak. What I mean by that is at the time, there was only one band in the area that had recorded on vinyl. In fact, they opened up for the Eagles. I think it was the Eagles. They did some big things over in Europe. But they were the only ones that did anything like that. And I said, I want to record a record. I mean, I want to record on vinyl because to me, that just seemed cool. So we put out our first 45. Some of you kids out there don't know what that means, but these were these little records. And I think, what were they, 7-inch records or 7.5-inch records, something like that. Big hole in the middle. And anyway, we recorded that in 1985, got released in 86. And then I forget what year it was. That was later. I'll tell you about that in a second. But anyway, we did that. And, the local radio stations actually played that record, which today that would never happen. Of course, they don't even play records anymore. But did some touring around with that band. In 1993, we I decided, I guess it was my project, my money. I decided to make an album. Let's record an album. I had a friend of mine that we'd play together in that very band. And we used to write a lot of music. We went into the studio and recorded an entire album. We did a video, which I just discovered here a couple of weeks ago, that still exists. I didn't know where that thing went. It actually appeared on MTV Basement Tapes back in the, I think it was 93. In fact, it was the year that album came out. Yeah. And from there, the band sort of fell apart. We did some shows, a couple of concerts, and then the band sort of everybody went different directions. But that was the music thing. Thereafter, and I'm trying to remember what year that would have been. Maybe 90, I don't know, maybe 95, 96, something, 95, maybe something like that. I was working in a factory. Our jobs got shipped down to Mexico, and I decided, something, now is the time. I always wanted to build drums, and I really didn't like the sound of the drums that I had. They were okay, but I decided to screw around, make my own, just, mess around with that. The first drum that I made for anyone else was Neil Peart from Rush. And it was kind of a strange way that happened, but he was my first customer. I mean, not just my first he was my very first customer. And of course, I used to repair drums as well, but that led me into, building drums for the David Letterman show, Jay Leno's show, and Jason Bonham, who many of you know, Led Zeppelin, John Bonham, the drummer, is his son. Several different groups like that. In fact, you remember the Nelson twins? Gunnar Nelson got to go backstage and eat dinner with those. He and Gunnar, and I'm trying to think of Matthew. I think it was his brother's name. Ate supper with the band and the crew and everything one night. Got invited to the show, and he played my drum and fell in love with it and blah blah blah. So that was a neat, a really fun time in my life, and it was a great experience to meet all these people and hung out with David Letterman and got to meet Natalie Cole, one of my, really enjoyed her music and her dad's music. So it was a really nice experience for a number of years. But the band kind of thing. After all that, I put together a 20-piece 1970s show band. It's called Captain Groovy, and we had Lou Graham, the lead singer from Foreigner. We had his because the band had broken up. Then we had his manager, and he managed our band. Took a liking to us, booked us in Wales, Mexico, big tour. That didn't happen because we played Taste of Chicago, and right after that Taste Chicago show, five people left the group, and so it was kind of an unfortunate situation. But it is what it is. But that band had a lot of fun. In fact, that was the most fun I've ever had in a band because I always wanted to play 1970s music, and this was finally the opportunity to do that. And it took me almost 40 years to get to that point. I had to wait a long time for that. But when I got that situation, it was the best band I ever had, most fun I ever had.
So the band is over. And is this when you transitioned into the Illinois Department of Transportation?
Yeah, I think, in fact, started working for the Illinois Department of Transportation when I started that band. In fact, I think I started the band after I was working for IDOT, as we call it. Yeah, so I was kind of doing both, which was a little weird because, we had things booked with the band. It was a little tough to work out the band and the emergency snow call outs that you get in Illinois frequently throughout the winter. And I was a seasonal player. I didn't do it full time. So it was it was a juggling act actually. And, there were, like a lunch hour. Most people are eating lunch. I'm on the phone with, the manager in different blah, 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 trying to put this band together. It was quite a task actually. I had 53 people in that organization. And you get manager and you get you get subs and everything else, and it's just a lot. Sound and lighting people, all that kind of good stuff, and transportation. That's another thing. But that's when I got into IDOT there. I did that for, let's see, from 2004 to 2019. In fact, it was New Year's Eve 2019 when I left. That's a little interesting story. You'd like to hear that?
We would.
A little off the wall. So I'm in the break room one day, and before you start work, people just kind of be in there early, and going through their cell phones and checking their mail and all that kind of stuff, like at any job, right? Well, I happen to open up, and I think it was Instagram. I'll open up my messages, and here's this message from this gentleman. In fact, I don't even know who he is to this day, but trying to think of his name, but I can't. Anyway, he said, "Hey, have you ever thought about hosting your own radio show?" And I thought, who the hell is this guy? I didn't know who he was. And why are you asking me such weird questions like that? Well, anyway, I said, sure, pal, who wouldn't want to do that? Sent it back to him. Next day, I get another mess. I get a reply from this guy. And he says, well, I happen to know the owner of the station and I can set you up. And I'm like kind of laughing to myself. I'm like, yeah, sure, pal, whatever. That's fine. And he did. And in fact, I think I don't know if he asked my phone number. I think he asked for my email address. And so actually I gave him my email address. And I get an email from the owner of the station, W4CY Radio. And we're talking about doing my own show. And I'm like, wow. So I just started this business in March, right, of 2019. And here it is, October, I think, or early November of 2019. And this guy's saying, well, we could start your show. And I'm like, wait. I can't do that. I work during the daytime. I work, he's like, well, you can do it at 1:00. And here's what time slot I have open for you. And I thought, yeah, that's not going to work. And anyway, so you think about that. I thought about that for probably 2 or 3 days. And I decided, something? An opportunity like this only comes along once in a blue moon, as we say. I've worked here for almost 19 years or whatever it was, 17 years, I'm sorry. So I said, you know what? I think I'm going to do it. So I told everybody I'm going to, you know what, guys, I'm going to work here until the end of the year. course, I had told the guy at the radio station, I said, let's do that. Let's do it this way. We'll start right after the New Year, which ended up being the first part of February because I went to Mexico right after I left work. But I said, guys, I'm leaving IDOT. I said, you're not going anywhere. I said, okay. Well, I left it at that. Told the boss. We got called out New Year's Eve, 2019, and New Year's Eve to 2020, and we worked a 12-hour shift. Rolled out of the truck. There was snowplow, 7 a.m., December 31st, 2019, and I never went back. I never looked back, never went back. In fact, they called me and said, hey, you went back to work, everybody did, on like January 3rd or something. They said, you're late for work. You've never been late for work. I said, I'm not coming in. They go, what? I said, not ever again. I won't see you guys ever again. Sorry. You have a good one. Bye-bye now. That's what started this career.
So it starts your career. And is this when the camping show started, or what were you doing at the radio station?
Yeah, that was the camping show. In fact, yeah, thank you. That was the camping show, which went on for, gosh, my first show was awkward, Tom. It was terrible. I was super nervous, first of all. And the producer of the show if it wouldn't have been for her helping me along, I'd have been doing the Jackie Gleason, it was very nervous first show. So
who was your first guest?
Actually, I did the first show myself, but my first guest, I believe, was Cliff Jacobson. Yeah, in fact, I'm sure it was Cliff Jacobson. And we talked about that later. It was kind of funny, but he was my first guest of the show, and he was my very last guest of the show. We did the camping show for 150 episodes, and believe it was December 14th of 2022, last year. I decided that it was probably to our best interest to rebrand the show. Now, first of all, we've talked about everything we could camping and paddling, at least canoeing, that one could without starting to repeat some things. And I'm just not the kind of person who likes to repeat. In fact, I don't really like to even repeat myself. So I didn't want to do that with my show. And a rebrand lent itself the opportunity, or lent us the opportunity to attract more sponsors and in different areas, in various areas. We still don't have Red Bull, just saying, but that's what I'm talking about. Instead of, the canoes and all that sort of stuff. It could be anyway, because we talk about so much on this new show. The new show, which started, we took a little break there, middle of December, and I think our first show was January 8th. And that show is called Outdoors People. And what we tried to accomplish there was, and as far as I know, we're the only ones doing this type of a show. It's sort of an all-inclusive show. Now, it's really not about, like, the camping show was focused on camping, obviously the name, camping show. This new show isn't really focused on things as much as it is on people who are doing things in the outdoors, such as yourself. You're an outdoors man, Tom. Which, by the way, is why I find it interesting to talk to you. You've got a really, you've got an outgoing personality, but you've done a lot of things. It's very interesting to have conversations with you. Those are the kind of people, you are the kind of people we have on this show, on Outdoors People.
I've been on your show.
Yes, you have. And very close to home, as a matter of fact. So, the funny part is, the whole outdoors thing is really just a means by which to interview interesting people. And that's the angle that I'm coming from. It's really about the people. Of course, we do some things, some products. We talk about places, all that kind of stuff. But it's really about the people. It's about their personalities, and it's about, what they were feeling and experiencing inside when they jump out of airplanes, for instance, or when they're setting a world's record. We had a number of world champions on our show. It's really more about that, because everybody can identify with people, or at least they should be able to. Not everybody can identify with camping, so it's really a smaller group. So that's kind of what we were after, and I think we've achieved it. Broadening our viewer base, our audience base. So, and of course, it's not just the television show. We also do the simultaneous radio broadcast and podcasts and all that sort of stuff. But Outdoors People was just an extension of something I've always wanted to do. If I were going to be in a situation where I'm either interviewing people or writing about people, that sort of thing. So this really fits my fancy, I guess, so to speak.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Mike and Jen's Hot Cocoa. Introducing Mike and Jen's Hot Cocoa, crafted in Duluth, Minnesota, the hot cocoa capital of the world. With just 5 simple ingredients, including high-quality whole milk powder, it's sure to become a family favorite. Get yours today. Shop at the Duluth Pack store or online at duluthpack.com. Let's talk a little bit about that. And first of all, before we jump into that, for our listeners, CW, give them all of your social handles, give them Facebook and all of the information. So if they want to come and in the future watch your show, or if they want to go back and look at old episodes that you have in the can, that people can go look at it, because it's very interesting and some really unique people you've had on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for allowing me to do that, Tom. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, Google, Pandora, all those others. You can, it's always C.W. Goetz Outdoors. And I'm going to spell that for you because Goetz is a funny little German name that people, but it's